A very good afternoon, everybody. I hope you guys can hear me and see me very clearly, and I am going to start with a quick overview about how the GS paper 3 GS mains paper 3 was, and we will be discussing what questions came up in the exam, right? So without any further delay, let's get started. Okay, so guys, first of all, register your presence in the chat box so that I can see that you can see me and hear me clearly and there's no technical issues, and who all have joined I can know. Okay, so today GS paper 3 was held. On 8th of January we had essay paper. On 9th January, that is yesterday, we had JS paper 1 and JS paper 2, and today already we have come up with the overview of GS paper 3. A disclaimer, first of all, this is not a proper analysis. Of course, you should not be expecting a proper detailed analysis of the paper. It will be coming up soon. But this is more about that how the paper was, from where the questions were asked, whether there was any repetition of the questions, or whether there was something on expected grounds. Good afternoon, Rajesh Kumar Maurya, Dr. Shikha Yadav, good afternoon, very good afternoon. Okay, so as you can see on your screen, this mains, GS paper 3 mains has been completed. Now, right now, GS paper 4, that ethics paper, is going on, and there are a few questions that were asked related to current or very recent developments, and as we have already seen in the pattern of UPSC, some questions were asked from last 2 years current affairs as well. Okay, so let's see what all were there. Government initiatives and schemes were asked. A few questions were very straightforward. For example, the Jal Shakti Abhiyan question, very straightforward question. Then the question on environment impact assessment, comparing the environment impact assessment of 2020 and the rules of 2006. Again, very straightforward question asked in the exam, although it is not expected that UPSC asks much of such data based questions, but yes, this time there were a few straightforward questions also. So some of them were straightforward, and some of them rather were some analytical questions also. Analytical in the sense that you will have to think on the spot, and if you do not have proper understanding of the topic, you might not be having as much fodder to write in the questions. Okay, so yeah. Then overall questions were relatively easier as compared to GS paper 1 and 2 that was conducted yesterday. Then economy section. Now just understand that GS paper 3 can be divided into 4 parts. Okay, we can divide GS paper 3 mainly into 4 parts, right? What kind of what 4 parts? Your economy, questions based on economy. Okay, questions based on, yes, economics or economy. Then questions which are agriculture topic centric. Then questions which are related to environment or disaster management or science and tech. Okay, this is one group, and the 4th subcategory is internal security. Okay, internal security. You can broadly divide your GS paper 3 into these 4 groups, and in these we will be seeing that questions were asked from which of the domains. Okay, yes, so the questions were directly from the syllabus. Question on GST composition was from current affairs. Agriculture section had 4 questions, like previous year, like the 2019 mains. We again saw a good focus on agriculture topic. Okay, and but there was nothing very specific asked by like in previous years. A few terms, like, yeah, in 2019 paper there was a question on cyber dome. Okay, a question on cyber dome. Such specific questions were not seen as much in this paper like it was there in 2019 paper. Okay, questions were straightforward, relatively easier as compared to last year's paper, or almost on the similar standard. Okay, then science and technology section again had 4 questions. The questions were directly from the syllabus. There was nothing like that has come out of the box or completely out of the syllabus, nothing like that. Okay, the questions were asked mainly on the application of technology, because you will see one question which asks about types of cyber attacks. One question was asking about types of cyber attacks. Okay, so yes, this was also one sort of question. There were about 4-5 questions from environment and disaster management as well. Quickly coming on to the beginning of the paper. Internal security has good weightage this time as compared to last few years. Internal security questions there were some questions talking about the last question of the paper talking about the cross-border threats and internal security threats from 3 countries, Bangladesh, Myanmar and Pakistan. Again, this was one good question which requires good amount of analysis. Yes, so this was one. Then overall the paper was easy, and students who have practiced answer writing pretty well, because the questions which were asked were not something very specific or something very deep into some topic. Okay, they were general, and yes, they were those topics which were in news. Okay, nothing कि बहुत 4-5 years पहले का कुछ पूछ लिया, ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं आया है. ठीक है, all the topics were you must have heard about. If you have practiced, you would know more about it. If you have not practiced, you would still know a few words about it. Okay, so it is all about how much you have practiced. Then a score of 110 plus would be a good score in this GS paper 3 of 2020. Talking about the very first question, rather I would say the questions based on agriculture topic were very scoring. Okay, like last year also, there were questions asked on integrated farm management. There was question asked on watershed development and such questions. So these are the core areas of agriculture that you should all be keeping your eyes on while practicing answer writing, while preparing the questions. Okay, now let's get started with the very first question. It says, explain intergenerational and intragenerational issues of equity from perspective of inclusive growth and sustainable development. Okay, so this is something which is a core favorite of UPSC. Why I am saying it is a core favorite of UPSC? Because UPSC has been asking questions on inclusive growth quite often now. Okay, it has been asking questions on inclusive growth quite often. Yes, so it is, like I just said, it is inclusive growth and sustainable development. Last year also, 2019, inclusive growth and sustainable development question asked. 2016 also it was asked. 2013 also it was asked. So inclusive growth is one core area of UPSC. I mean, one favorite area I would say, which UPSC pretty often asks, and you should be prepared about it. Now, what was the question? Let's understand the question first of all. Right. Question is saying, explain intergenerational and intragenerational issues of equity from the perspective of inclusive growth. What do you mean by intergenerational and intragenerational? First of all, understanding the term intergenerational, that is, this considers the previous generation, the present generation and the future generation. Okay, right. Among all these generations, how issues of equity have already been and how issues of equity are increasing. For example, if we talk on the grounds of sustainable development, right, so you will understand that right now the present generation, which is using the resources recklessly, it is compromising on the needs of future generation, right? So this is the issue of equity if we talk about sustainable development. So I would say this question was a moderate to difficult. Always we divide answer into intro, body, and conclusion. Okay, so in intro, if you require, you could have given the definition of what is inclusive growth. You could have given the definition of what is sustainable growth. Inclusive growth definition and sustainable development definition should be by heart by now. Okay, inclusive growth definition of EIA, OECD. Okay, sorry. Inclusive growth definition of OECD is very commonly found and usually used, which talks about the inclusive availability of resources to all, so that all the sections of society can be equally catered to. Okay, then Brundtland Commission definition of sustainable development you can always use everywhere, which assures well-being of the whole global population. So when you're talking about global population currently, that is intra-generational equity, whereas if you're talking about future generation with respect to current generation, that is intergeneration equity. Okay, so I hope you're understanding what is intra-generational. That is currently whatever is your generation, among those, देखो एग्जाम्पल से समझते हैं इस चीज़ को, है ना. यू शुड ऑलवेज गिव मोर एंड मोर एग्जाम्पल्स इन योर आंसर. Like if we take intra-generational case, first of all, case of intra-generational first of all. So intra-generational, you can always give example of the youth currently, which is in rural area or urban area, or the youth which is getting access to the opportunities in developed countries or least developed and developing countries. Okay, developed countries or developing countries. This is how you could have given examples. So because the youth is of same generation, but among intra-generation of those youth who belong to same generation, among them also they have so many issues of equity. Okay, in equity, when we talk about equity, you must talk about accessibility and affordability to the resources, and accessibility and affordability, and also how much is the outreach to the opportunities, right? So this is something you could have discussed in this answer. Then intergenerational, when you will talk about, you can always discuss how our ancestors did not have access to so many resources because the technology advancement wasn't as much, and now what access we have and how we are using, and whether we are ensuring that that our future generation will get access to those resources or not. So this is one thing. Apart from that, what you could have discussed about is the rich poor divide. You could have discussed about the rich poor divide, which is an issue of inclusive growth. Inclusive growth is not happening in the present generation, right? Inclusive growth, if you talk about the present generation, again this classification would have worked here, of rural urban area. Are the youth of rural area are developing or are experiencing growth as good as the youth of urban area is experiencing growth, or youth of western countries who is experiencing growth? Is the youth of developing countries or least developing countries experiencing inclusive growth on the same terms? No, right? So okay, so this is something you could have talked about on these lines. Moving on to question number 2. ठीक है, इसमें हमेशा इसमें थोड़ा सा ऐसे टाइप की चीज़ें डिस्कस करनी थी. इन कंक्लूजन यू कुड हैव सिंपली टॉक्ड अबाउट दैट फॉर अचीविंग द SDG गोल्स ऑफ 2030 व्हाट ऑल थिंग्स आर रिक्वायर्ड. तो थोड़ा सा फ्यूचरिस्टिक कंक्लूजन के साथ यू कुड हैव एंडेड दिस आंसर. ओके, then guys, always remember that if you're writing, especially for GS paper 3, I'm talking about for GS paper 3, always, because this is not a complete analysis of the paper, this is just a overview कि questions आए कैसे थे, how were the questions, है ना. तो एक ये overview था, लेकिन जब हम detailed analysis करेंगे and when you guys will go back and find out the facts, so always make sure कि आपके पास एक फैक्ट बुक होनी चाहिए जिसमें हर टॉपिक से रिलेटेड, एटलीस्ट इकोनॉमी के हर टॉपिक से, जैसे इकोनॉमी की प्लानिंग से रिलेटेड, एग्रीकल्चर से रिलेटेड, एम्प्लॉयमेंट से रिलेटेड, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर एनर्जी से रिलेटेड, इन सब से रिलेटेड कुछ फैक्ट्स हों. आइदर द फैक्ट्स फ्रॉम बजट, either the facts from economic survey, or some other facts from some other international reports, always use the facts and the keywords in your answers if you really want to fetch marks. नहीं तो बहुत ही generic answer लगता है और पढ़ने वाले को बिल्कुल पसंद नहीं आता, ठीक है. So what you have to make sure is that you put facts and keywords in your answers. Okay. अब second question था define potential GDP and its determinants. So इसके लिए सबसे पहले आपको पता होना चाहिए what really is potential GDP, ठीक है. तो potential GDP अगर हम OECD की definition देखते हैं तो it is defined in OECD's economic outlook publication as level of output that an economy can produce at a constant inflation rate. आप समझ रहे हैं इस बात को, I hope, कि एक आपका GDP increase, your GDP increase can be in two ways. Either your goods and services produced are increasing or the general price levels are increasing, right? Right. So when your actual goods and services are increasing, it can also it is a better increase in GDP. लेकिन अगर आपकी general price levels increase हो रहे हैं, so more of inflation is contributing to the growth rate of GDP, right? So what is potential gross domestic product or potential GDP? It is the level of output that an economy can produce at constant inflation rate, यानी कि आपके जो constant prices रहे, inflation rate constant रहे और उस पे आपकी economy कितने goods and services produce कर सकती है in a particular time span, right? So this is about it. And although it is said that although just give me a moment. So although an economy can temporarily produce more than its potential level of output, that comes at a cost of rising inflation. ठीक है, तो आपको potential GDP समझ आ गया कि अब क्या है, okay, कि कितना potential है एक economy का. Now the question after you know the definition, it was asking what are the determinants. Okay, what are the determinants of potential GDP and what are the factors that have been inhibiting India from realizing its potential GDP. देखो, whenever you have to talk about the determinants of potential GDP, you should always talk about a few things. देखो, GDP की आपको जब भी बात करनी है तो you should broadly divide it into primary activities, secondary activities and tertiary activities and how their determinants contribute to the increasing GDP. ठीक है, जैसे अब primary activities की बात करो तो कैसे हम what are the determinants of agriculture production. Okay, agriculture का जो share है, agriculture share in GDP, how do we what are the determinants, what are the factors which decide the share of agriculture in GDP. ठीक है, कि agriculture market reforms कैसे हैं, कितना support है for agriculture sector. Or if we come to the secondary sector of manufacturing, ठीक है, if we come on to secondary sector of manufacturing, so you can always talk about that how your country, especially India, जब आप ये second चीज को focus कर रहे हो, that what factors have been inhibiting India from realizing its potential. तो factors which have been inhibiting India from realizing its potential, जैसे हमारा research and development पे इतना focus नहीं है, हमारा जो HRD है, human resource development, we do not have as much focus. So these are as well as determinants. ये determinants भी हैं which determine the potential GDP, and these will also be used in when you are talking about inhibiting factors. For example, you will say that focus on human resource is very, very essential and it is one inhibiting factor in realizing the potential GDP. When you talk about human resource, you should know that you have to talk about education, levels of education, level of skill level of people, healthcare facilities of people. ठीक है, तो अगर आपको manufacturing share बढ़ाना है तो how will you increase the manufacturing share? You have to have better technology, better infra, you should have skilled labor which is available. Your policies, there should be no policy paralysis, okay, which is a determinant of potential GDP, right? So there should be no policy paralysis in terms of there should be no for example land laws hai, तो land laws, labor laws, there should be no bottlenecks in terms of these laws, right? So this is one thing which will increase your manufacturing contribution to GDP. Then when you will come to tertiary sector, when you will come to service sector. Okay, so what are the determinants which determine the share of tertiary sector? Your services, again, healthcare services, education services, or transportation services, how they can contribute to increasing and reaching the level of potential GDP. These are some things you could have written in this question. Okay, so like GDP, potential GDP represents the market value of goods and services. All these things, I hope you understood. See, what you have to focus in, जैसे ही आपने क्वेश्चन पढ़ा है, आपके दिमाग में स्ट्रक्चर डिफाइन हो जाना चाहिए. जैसे अभी मैंने आपको स्ट्रक्चर बना के दिखाया कि प्राइमरी, सेकेंडरी एंड टर्शरी. So your structure should be defined in your mind once you read the question, that how you going to write the answer. Okay, then conclusion, आप futuristic conclusion पे end कर सकते हो simply, right? That above steps पे जो भी हमने suggestions दिए हैं, अगर उन पे focus किया जाए with proper implementation, and will potential GDP can be realized. Okay, then what we have is your third question. What are the main constraints in transports and marketing? Again, a very expected question, because agriculture market reforms is a hot topic these days. So what are the main constraints in transports and marketing of agriculture produce in India? तो जब भी आप this is related to your transport and marketing topic, जैसे आप देख पा रहे हो. Okay, so yeah, when we have to talk about this, about the marketing reforms and constraints in transports and marketing of agriculture produce, तो क्या क्या constraints हैं? आपको क्या लगता है? What do you think are the constraints? You can give some inputs in the chat box. What are the constraints? See, one constraint is that we do not have enough mandis. Number of mandis are less as compared to जितनी number of farmlands हैं. Okay, जितने number of farmlands हैं which are very far away from some mandis. So the farmer has to rely on the middleman to sell his or her produce, right? So number of mandis is less. Mandis less in number. Okay, this is one thing which is the main constraint in transport and marketing. Then lesser focus on storage systems, है ना? Storage systems पे lesser focus है. अभी तो recently your Essential Commodities Act has been amended, but इससे पहले क्या था? You did not have much of availability, और आपको you were not allowed to store much of the food. Why? Because it was seen as part of hoarding. लेकिन unless and until you do not have good storage systems, you cannot even store. So lack of proper storage systems, lack of mega food parks, lack of such transportation facilities, जो आपके coolers होते हैं, proper cold store transport systems होते हैं, which can prevent your agriculture produce from wastage, right? तो इन सब चीज़ों को ध्यान में रखना बहुत important है for making sure that your agriculture marketing is boosted. Okay, so because you know huge percentage of our agriculture produce gets perished, right? It gets perished. So wastage की problem को deal करने के लिए so that agriculture produce which gets wasted, with that can rather be sold and benefits can be achieved from that. So you have to focus on wastage. So this is one constraint. Mandis हो गया, number of mandis, storage systems कम है, mega food parks कम है. Okay, right? Then what more? What do you think? What more you can write is, you can write that although MSP is declared for so many agriculture crops, but it is given only for a few crops. So if you focus on more crops, if you focus more on horticulture, if you focus more on cash crops, if you focus more on non-food crops, ठीक है, तो that can add to your agriculture produce. And again, better procurement हो, or better if you can bridge the farm to industry gap. Okay, if you can bridge the farm to industry gap, that has a vital role in addressing the constraints in transport and marketing of agriculture produce. ठीक है, तो अब जब आप बात कर रहे हो कि constraints in transports and marketing की, ये वाली तो मेन चीज़ें हो जाएंगी. इसको आप बस थोड़ा सा suggestion part में डाल सकते हो. The MSP वाला thing, you can simply put it in suggestion in about 2-3 lines only. Okay, because your major focus of the answer should be on transport and marketing of agriculture produce. Okay. So this is about third question. Talking about fourth question, what are the challenges? एंड अपॉर्चुनिटीज़, अगेन एग्रीकल्चर टॉपिक से आ रहा है आपका ये क्वेश्चन. ये क्या कह रहा है क्वेश्चन कि चैलेंजेस एंड अपॉर्चुनिटीज़. अगेन बहुत ईजी क्वेश्चन लगा मुझे ये वाला भी. काफ़ी सारी स्कीम्स के बारे में आप डिस्कस कर सकते हो गवर्नमेंट की. पहले आपको सिंपली चैलेंजेस बताना है. प्रॉपर स्ट्रक्चर तो क्वेश्चन ने ही आपको दे दिया है बना के. क्वेश्चन ने ही आपको दे दिया कि आपको पहले चैलेंजेस की बात करनी है, फिर आपको अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ की बात करनी है, फिर हाउ कैन इनकम ऑफ फार्मर्स कैन बी सस्टेनेबली इंक्रीज्ड. तो इसमें आप डबलिंग फार्मर इनकम बाय 2022 की बात करोगे, राइट. सो क्वेश्चन आपको सीधा सीधा स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड, कुछ भी एनालिटिकल या कुछ भी ऐसा कुछ नहीं है जो यू हैव टू रीड बिटवीन द लाइन्स, राइट. सो सीधा आप चैलेंजेस बात करो. what are the challenges in food processing sector? What I have said in the previous answer, talking about mega food parks, better cold storage structures. Then you can again talk about the farm and industry gap. You can talk about that although we have portals like enam, है ना, we have such portals, but अभी तक इसका full potential has not been achieved. So many challenges you can talk about in the food processing sector, talking about the standards and the quality of food crop produced, because it is said that the quality of Indian food crop doesn't match the sanitary and phytosanitary standards of other countries. ठीक है, right? तो this is being said in that. फिर इसके बाद क्या बात हो रही है? अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ इन फूड प्रोसेसिंग इन दी कंट्री. व्हाट आर दी अपॉर्चुनिटीज़? ठीक है, अगर हम अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ की बात करें तो अपॉर्चुनिटीज़, इंडिया बीइंग दी सेल्फ सफिशिएंट कंट्री, और हमारे पास वी हैव a lot to export. So when you're talking about opportunities, you can focus every sector in terms of non food crops को आप फोकस कर सकते हो एज एन अपॉर्चुनिटी इन फूड फूड प्रोसेसिंग सेक्टर की अगर हम बात करें तो यू कैन फोकस मोर ऑन फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल दी स्कीम्स. ठीक है, कि दी स्कीम्स, इन आपको अगर इन स्कीम्स के बारे में पता है, राइट, सो यू कैन सिंपली फोकस ऑन जैसे ऑयल सीड्स, focus on oil seeds, focus on we have schemes for copra and other schemes. ठीक है, तो इन सब चीज़ों पे आप फोकस करके बता सकते हो that how these act as opportunities. Then another major thing that you can talk as opportunity in food processing sector is that India's location. Okay, India has India की जो geographical location है, okay, India's geographical location allows a huge variety of crops to grow in India, right? So इस regard में you can talk about that this acts as an opportunity for India. If you talk about northern part की बात करते हैं तो northern parts की क्या food products को आप food processing में use कर सकते हैं, and you can export it. How it can increase your agriculture export? How can it increase your, how it is an opportunity for increasing agriculture GDP? Okay, so all these things you can talk about in this answer. So इसी में इन सब के की पॉइंट्स लेते हुए, वट एवर यू टॉक्ड इन फर्स्ट पार्ट ऑफ द बॉडी, उसी के की पॉइंट्स लेते हुए यू कैन टॉक अबाउट हाउ इनकम ऑफ द फार्मर कैन सस्टेनेबली बी इंक्रीज एंड व्हाट स्टेप्स गवर्नमेंट हैज ऑलरेडी टेकन इन रिगार्ड टू दैट, एंड दस अचीविंग द गोल ऑफ डबलिंग फार्मर इनकम बाय 2022. ठीक है, तो ऐसा हो जाएगा कुछ क्वेश्चन नंबर 4. Then talking about question number 5, what do you understand by nanotechnology? Okay, so question number 5 talking about nanotechnology. Again, definition आपको आनी चाहिए. You should already be knowing the definition of nanotechnology. You talk about its usage, right? In first part, this is part 1 of your question. Okay, so in first part, first you will define what is nanotechnology, then you will talk about its applicability in various fields across various sectors, be it robotics, biotechnology, services, and all these things you can talk about. Okay, so first you define and talk about its applicability in various sectors. Then in part 2 of your body you will talk about how it can really help in improving the healthcare facilities. Okay, how it can actually really help in improving healthcare facilities. So here you will be discussing about it can help you for better diagnosis. Yes, Kaushal Kumar. Okay, Devesh Pajpai, good afternoon. Kaushal Kumar, 1 to 100 nanometer size of nanomaterial. Yes, right? So you can talk about better diagnosis के लिए this nanotechnology detectors are there, okay, which can detect your cardiac diseases, right? It can nanotechnology detectors can detect any deposition in your arteries, ठीक है? तो ये सारी चीजें, yes, Kaushal. So these deposition you can talk about in this answer. Then you can talk about that from chemotherapy to eye surgeries to different diabetes, right? In different diseases, nanotechnology has its applicability, right. Drug delivery is one major factor. Delivery is one major factor in which nanotechnology has its application, right? So these are some of the points where you can talk about how it can help you in health sector, right? How nanotechnology can help you in health sector, how it can help you diagnose the cancer cells, or such tumors can be diagnosed with nano detectors, okay? Yes, and rather there is something you should talk about, you should be knowing about. Guys, this is an outline, मैं आपको framework दे रही हूँ, आपको इसके बाद जाके search करना है, ठीक है? जैसे आपको you should search about what are nano sponges, ठीक है? nano sponge क्या होता है? तो you can talk about that nano sponge are some such thing which can absorb toxins from your bloodstream, ठीक है? आपकी bloodstream से ये टॉक्सिन्स को अब्जॉर्ब कर सकता है. तो ऐसे बहुत सारी न्यूमरस एप्लीकेबिलिटीज हैं ऑफ नैनो टेक्नोलॉजी दैट कुड हैव बीन डिस्कस्ड. अगर किसी ने प्रॉपरली ये नैनो टेक्नोलॉजी को कवर किया होता, सो दैट पर्सन वुड हैव रिटन अ गुड आंसर for this question. Or you just have to write 150 words. 150 words is nothing if you have good fodder in your mind to write. Okay, so again another good question. Talking about sixth question, it says, how is science interwoven deeply with our lives? What are the striking changes in agriculture triggered off by science-based technologies? ठीक है, इसका क्या मतलब? देखो, ये थोड़ा सा ना ऐसे टाइप का क्वेश्चन है. ऐसे टाइप का मतलब जैसे आप ऐसे में आप बातें करते हो, okay, you have to bring up things on your own. It is a little similar to that. When you will talk about the first part, which says how is science interwoven deeply in our life, so you will talk about almost everything. कि कैसे आपके आसपास, how do you see science, okay, from your daily course to your profession to सब हर चीज में कहीं ना कहीं you can see science, right? Okay, so either it is your biological mechanism, biological rhythm, okay, to your rather the climate which is affecting whatever your economy is doing, okay, how climate is affecting that, okay, so that also has science involved in it, right? तो science बहुत सारी चीज़ों में आप अपने आसपास देख सकते हो, है ना? Okay, you can talk about rather light, electricity, you can talk about how magnetism, और ये छोटी चीज़ें in single pointers, ठीक है? Guys, अगर आप single pointers, bullet points में आप लिख सकते हो ना कि how these things can affect your lives, right? You don't have to go in detail. अगर आपको ज़्यादा dimension cover करनी है, if you have to cover more dimensions, you can simply give bullet points. ऐसा नहीं है कि एक point लिख दिया, उसको 3 लाइन तो उसको explain करने में लगा दी. No. Okay, simply give the points. Okay, right. So yes, I'm teaching because of science, Kaushal. So how the gadgets and the technology around you is helping in improving your lifestyles, right. So what are the striking changes in agriculture triggered off by science-based technology? Again, a very good question. ये part 2 बनता है आपके 6th question का. So you were talking about what are the striking changes in agriculture, how agriculture was done with very basic tools earlier, and how agriculture has improved now from spraying pesticides to analyzing soil health to using drones in agriculture. Okay, you can talk about precision agriculture over here. Okay, then you can talk about other technologies. Yes, genetic engineering, Kaushal, right? You can talk about genetic engineering over here. ठीक है, तो बहुत सारी चीज़ें यू कैन टॉक अबाउट दैट हाउ changes in agriculture are triggered by your science based technologies, from sowing to plowing to harvesting to transporting, everything has technology involved when it comes to agriculture, है ना. तो पूरा agriculture का cycle is transformed by science and technology. So this is something you could have talked about in this answer. Yes, absolutely, Dr. Shikha Yadav. Good points, ठीक है. मतलब now that we are discussing, so you can always give your points, because हम लोग मिलके we are generating what inputs could have been given to these answers, right? So yes, Dr. Shikha Yadav, absolutely. Modern technology, biotechnology, right? All these things, microbiology से हर चीज़, all the domains you could touch up, ठीक है. साइंस के सारे domains पे आप touch कर सकते थे in this answer. A very broad ended answer to see the creativity of the person who is writing the answer. Okay, so talking about question number 7, बहुत ही straight forward answer question था ये, highly straight forward. अगर आपने EIA 2020 पढ़ा था तो I'm sure that the person who might have read EIA 2020 notification, that person would have also gone through the previous or the existing EIA notification, ठीक है. क्योंकि अगर आप सिर्फ रूल्स तो पढ़ के ख़त्म नहीं कर देते, when you're reading something you always tend to compare it to what is happening now. When you're talking about EIA 2020, you talk about how the norms have been diluted as compared to the current scenario, right? तो इस बात के बारे में आपने no idea at all, because ये काफ़ी, जिसको ये आता है, जिसने पढ़ा होगा उसको आता होगा, जिसने नहीं पढ़ा होगा उन्होंने फिर बस ऐसे ही must have beaten about the bush. Okay, so there are so many changes in EIA 2020 basically which you could have discussed in this answer. Properly आप differentiate कर सकते थे. Yes, it was in news, Ankit Jain, right? बहुत बार न्यूज़पेपर में बहुत सारे आर्टिकल्स आए हैं इस पे EIA 2020 पे. So many articles discussing and analyzing how EIA 2020 is a dilution as compared to the previous norms and the previous notification, and how it is an encroachment into environment, ठीक है. कैसे environment के लिए अच्छा नहीं है, right? Yes, for those who had enough fodder to write, the paper might have seemed a bit lengthy, but yes, see, जैसे EIA 2020 Environment Impact Assessment 2020 rules जो हैं, they talk about post facto approval, that even if you have started some industry on emergency basis and you have not taken environment clearances beforehand, so it has provisions for some of the industries that you can take post facto approval for that. That post facto means after starting the industry you can take approval. Okay, then it talks about removal of several activities from purview of public consultation process. ये बहुत ही important और most controversial point है. Why? Because yes, it talks about that so many industries, so many sectors have been put out of this purview of public consultation process. Public consultation process क्या होता है? Yes, absolutely. You can कौशल, बिल्कुल आप डाल सकते हो. Okay, so yes, talking about environment impact assessment, guys, a few keywords that I would like कि आप लोग जाके थोड़ा सा सर्च करना, ठीक है. तो you can search about what is category B2 when we talk about environment impact assessment. Okay, you can see that which of the industries have put out, which of the projects rather are put out of the public consultation preview. Public consultation preview क्या होता है? That those industries that are about to start, या फिर कोई एक project start होने वाला है. Okay, so in that, yes, that you have to discuss with the local community regarding the project, कि local community के लिए how beneficial or how disadvantages it is, like if that project is displacing the people, or what will be the negative externalities of that project on the people around that area, ठीक है. So all these things come under public consultation, but so many different projects, ठीक है, बहुत ही सारे different projects like it is your irrigation projects or hydroelectric projects up to 25 megawatt or oil and gas exploration projects, ऐसे बहुत सारे projects हैं which have been kept out of public consultation. ठीक है. So these are a few things about you could have discussed. Then you could have discussed about another thing, that is, ये हो गया पोस्ट फैक्टो, हो गया पब्लिक कंसल्टेशन, हो गया न्यू प्रोविजन फॉर पोस्ट फैक्टो, ओके, पोस्ट फैक्टो क्लियरेंस. देन डाइल्यूटेड कंप्लायंस मैकेनिज्म. डाइल्यूटेड कंप्लायंस मैकेनिज्म, एक तो वन मेजर थिंग अबाउट एनवायरमेंट इम्पैक्ट असेसमेंट इज दैट द कंपनी हु स्टार्टिंग अ प्रोजेक्ट, ओके, इट इज रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर एनवायरमेंट इम्पैक्ट असेसमेंट, एंड द थर्ड पार्टी which actually will be assessing the environment impact is appointed by the company itself. तो थोड़ा सा conflict of interest is involved in doing this kind of environment impact assessment. Okay, so yes, this promotes expansion is another provision in environment impact assessment 2020 rules which talk about that if project has to be expanded, ठीक है, तो पहले अलाउड नहीं था. इन 2006 जो एग्जिस्टिंग नॉर्म्स हैं, इट वाज नॉट अलाउड टू एक्सपैंड द प्रोजेक्ट विदाउट एनी प्रॉपर क्लियरेंस, ओके. लेकिन अभी ओवर 50% ऑफ द एक्सपेंशन ऑफ द प्रोजेक्ट हैज बीन अलाउड अंडर दिस नोटिफिकेशन ऑफ 2020, राइट, विच इज अ वेरी लिबरल पॉइंट. वाई? बिकॉज आप ऐसे ही एक प्रोजेक्ट को एक्सपैंड करने का अलाउंस दे रहे हो, ओके, बिकॉज it may have a major environment impact, because 50% expansion is a huge, जो मतलब total वो one already existing है, जैसे आपका 100%, 50% और expand हो जाएगा. So that is a major increase and expansion in the project, and it can have major consequences on the environment. So many things that you can discuss about this question, ठीक है. You can compare, go back and find out about both the rules. Talking about question number 8, what are the salient features? देखो, this is highly straightforward question about salient features of जल शक्ति अभियान, ठीक है, बिल्कुल ही स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड क्वेश्चन है. आप सीधा गो बैक सर्च अबाउट व्हाट इज जल शक्ति अभियान, तो इससे आपको क्या पता चलता है? व्हाट यू अंडरस्टैंड फ्रॉम दिस इज दैट सो मेनी स्कीम्स जो पूछी जा सकती हैं, ठीक है. स्पेशली जल शक्ति अभियान अभी बहुत ज़्यादा फोकस रहा है इन लास्ट 2 years ऑन वाटर कंजर्वेशन, क्लीनिंग ऑफ द रिवर्स, राइट. बहुत सारी चीज़ों पे, वाटर सिक्योरिटी पे बहुत ज़्यादा फोकस रहा है. सो दैट इज़ वाई हाईली स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड एंड बिट एक्सपेक्टेड क्वेश्चन 2 वी कैन से, ठीक है. तो ये एक स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड था. EIA वाला काफ़ी स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड क्वेश्चन था, ठीक है. So it talks what are the salient features of this abhiyan launched by Government of India for water conservation and water security. I don't think I need to discuss much about this question because it is highly factual in nature. It is up to you how well you have prepared the schemes. Agar the person who was writing, yes. तो अंकित जैन एक्चुअली यू नो बहुत ज़्यादा करंट अफेयर्स पे भी फोकस नहीं करना है. करंट अफेयर्स पे फोकस करना है, लेकिन यू शुड बी नोइंग दैट योर स्टैटिक पोर्शन इज नॉट कॉम्प्रोमाइज्ड. कि करंट अफेयर्स पे क्वेश्चन आए हैं, यस. तो इकोनॉमी का दिस इज द की कि जो आपका करंटली चल रहा है, करंट अफेयर्स में चल रहा है, वो तो आपको पता होना ही चाहिए. वट एवर इज गोइंग ऑन. फॉर एग्जाम्पल एनवायरमेंट इम्पैक्ट असेसमेंट जो एनवायरमेंट के रूल्स आए 2020 पेपर 3 में, वट एवर इज गोइंग ऑन करंटली वो तो आपको पता होना ही चाहिए. उससे 2 साल पहले उससे रिलेटेड क्या हुआ है, दैट ऑल्सो यू शुड नो इफ यू रियली वॉन्ट टू राइट गुड क्वालिटी आंसर्स. ओके, सो या right, so this is something you should be able to do an attempt by yourself, not discussing this one very so much in detail. Then discuss different types of cyber crimes and measures required to be taken. Now this is one again very factual, very straightforward and specific. मैं कहूँगी specific question है. If you do not know about this, ऐसा ना कभी कभार हो रहा है पिछले 2-3 साल से. in last 2-3 years we are seeing that यूपीएससी कुछ ऐसा पूछ रहा है जो बहुत स्पेसिफिक है. जैसे लास्ट ईयर साइबर डोम प्रोजेक्ट पूछा, उससे पहले यूपीएससी आस्क्ड अबाउट बोस आइंस्टीन कॉन्डेंसेट. ओके, सो यूपीएससी इज बिकमिंग अ लिटिल स्पेसिफिक इन 1 or 2 क्वेश्चंस, ठीक है. सो यस, इफ यू आर फ्रॉम IT बैकग्राउंड, थोड़ा सा टेक्नोलॉजी टेक बैकग्राउंड रहा है, सो यू कुड हैव अटेम्प्टेड दिस क्वेश्चन प्रीटी वेल. अदरवाइज साइबर सिक्योरिटी इज अ मेजर टॉपिक इन GS पेपर 3, तो ऐसा नहीं है कि ये कहीं सिलेबस से बाहर आया. ओके, सो व्हेन टॉकिंग अबाउट डिफरेंट टाइप्स ऑफ साइबर क्राइम्स, so many things you are there. You could have discussed about the malware, you can discussed about denial of service attacks, then phishing kya hai. Okay, then you could have discussed about different attacks that came up. जैसे आप WannaCry का example दे सकते थे, different bots that have come up, उन सब का examples आप दे सकते थे. There's something called SQL injection, right? इन सब चीज़ों का आप example दे सकते थे. Right, so many things that you could have discussed only if you knew. नहीं तो आप सीधा लिख के आते कि एक ट्रोजन होता है, एक वायरस होता है, एक ये होता है, वो होता है. No, okay. Yes, you have to talk about the types of attacks. Then you have to talk about that what are the vulnerable areas that individual security can be breached. The business organizations, उनके major data can be breached. Okay, government data can be breached, क्योंकि all these things are the vulnerabilities of data, right? तो ये वाले जो areas हैं, these showcase the vulnerabilities, right? Yanen Tiwari, nanotechnology in agriculture we have already discussed. Okay, so these are the components that you could have discussed. Then when we talk about the measures required to fight the menace, right? So measures में आप यही लिखोगे. First of all, yes, absolutely, darknet you can talk about. You can talk about that the data of people is sold on darknet. ठीक है, ये सारी चीज़ें आप लिख सकते हो if you know about it, if you have some factual backing. ठीक है, तो ये आप लिख सकते हो कि actually this is happening in current scenario and there are so many buyers, rather the countries and the companies, the big giants are highly dependent on data and how data is very crucial. अभी आप current WhatsApp की privacy policy का example दे सकते थे, right? So WhatsApp is changing its privacy policy, which is an encroachment into personal privacy, right? So how data can be used for cyber crimes, you could have talked about that. Okay, what are the measures required to fight the menace? Measures required में proper, पहले आप 2-3 lines में बस बता सकते थे that what government has already done to ensure cyber security. ठीक है, so for example government has taken many steps. If you have heard about certain, ठीक है, तो आप certain के बारे में लिख सकते थे that the steps have been taken to ensure स्वच्छ साइबर स्वच्छता केंद्र और ये सब चीज़ें, साइबर सुरक्षित भारत इनिशिएटिव, ये सब चीज़ें गवर्नमेंट हैज़ ऑलरेडी टेकन. बट what are the measures that are still needed? You should have talked about the data protection law. Proper data protection law is required. Okay, and every time data is being shared, वो लेना, अप्रूवल लेना बहुत ज़रूरी है from the individual, right? So many other steps that are required that you could have talked about, है ना? In terms of business organizations के लिए क्या steps होने चाहिए, individuals के लिए क्या steps होने चाहिए, government के लिए क्या steps होने चाहिए, right? So in that regard you could have talked about that what steps can be taken to fight the menace of data security. Yes, absolutely, that can be suggested. ठीक है. Then talking about 10th question, for effective border area management, discuss the steps required to be taken to deny local support to militants and suggest ways to manage favorable perception among locals. अब आप बताइए इसमें आप क्या लिखेंगे? Give me some inputs. I've been giving you inputs for a long time now. बताइए. It says for effective border area management, discuss the steps required to be taken to deny local support. Right, give me a moment. देखो क्या कह रही है. द क्वेश्चन इज सेइंग कि आपको इफेक्टिव बॉर्डर एरिया मैनेजमेंट करना है तो उसके लिए व्हाट आर द स्टेप्स दैट शुड बी टेकन कि लोकल सपोर्ट ना हो. ठीक है, इससे बिफोर स्टार्टिंग द क्वेश्चन एक चीज़ मुझे याद आ रही है. You know about Kartarpur corridor? ठीक है, जब Kartarpur corridor was started, so before starting of Kartarpur corridor there was a parliamentary committee. There was a parliamentary committee which was set up, and this parliamentary committee was given the task to search and recommend on whether the Kartarpur corridor should be opened or not. ठीक है, and it strongly recommended against. Rather, it said that the Kartarpur corridor should not be opened because it can have major security implications. ठीक है, तो कुछ उसी से मतलब मैं ये नहीं कह रही कि क्वेश्चन इज बेस्ड ऑन दैट इज वन क्यू फ्रॉम व्हाट द क्वेश्चन इज टॉकिंग अबाउट. क्वेश्चन पूछ रहा है कि आपको इफेक्टिव बॉर्डर एरिया मैनेजमेंट करना है. ओके, डिस्कस द स्टेप्स. यू हैव टू टॉक अबाउट द स्टेप्स which are required to take to deny local support to militants and also suggest ways to manage favorable perception. So for these, yes. For example, you can talk about that. Why is there, first of all, local support होता क्यों है? क्योंकि the locals of that area are influenced by the militants. Okay, be it the Red Corridor, be it the Nagaland वाला region, ठीक है, जहाँ पे NSCN टाइप की organizations are working, और म्यांमार, नागालैंड, अरुणाचल प्रदेश बॉर्डर, ठीक है, तो ये वाले regions ले लो, या जम्मू एंड कश्मीर region ले लो. So although not sounding extreme in these lines, but you could have talked that such militant groups, be it in the northern part of India, Jammu and Kashmir, be it in northeast part of India, they take the support of the locals to actually infiltrate. If they do not get support from the locals, major militant activities can be cut down, है ना? So yes, like Dr. Shikha Yadav is saying that proper policy development, employment generation, education, and these opportunities can be taken. These steps can be taken to deny local support. So for local support denial, there's a major पब्लिक सेंटिमेंट विच इज रिक्वायर्ड. ठीक है, आपको क्या ज़रूरत है? आपको एक पब्लिक सेंटिमेंट की ज़रूरत है विच इज़ प्रो कंट्री, प्रो स्टेट, एंड नॉट प्रो नेशन, आई वुड से, एंड नॉट इन सपोर्ट टू द मिलिटेंट्स. ठीक है, तो योर पीपल शुड हैव स्ट्रॉन्ग sentiment. और वो strong sentiment कैसे आएगा? when you work for the people, when you are focusing on human development, when you are focusing on human resource killing. ठीक है, तो इन सब चीज़ों से आपका these steps can be taken to deny local support. and of course intelligence agencies को ज़्यादा proactive और vigilant होने की ज़रूरत है that none of the locals are trapped by the militants, because there are examples of locals being bribed by the militants and all these. ठीक है, locals proper, जैसे पुलिस को, from police to intelligence agencies, proper intelligence ज़रूरी है that locals should be vigilant that they are not misused by the militants, है ना? तो ये सारी चीज़ें आप लोग बात कर सकते थे. This requires regular interaction between the police of that area, police personnel of that area and the locals. ठीक है, जब तक regular interaction नहीं होगा, there will be a communication gap between the police personnel and the locals. Such kind of support will always be extended. Okay, but border area management एक बार अच्छे से पढ़ लेना, so that you have a fair idea about which border area what are the vulnerabilities of the border area. Then talking about question number 11, it says explain the meaning of investment in an economy in terms of capital formation. Okay, discuss the factors to be considered while designing a concession agreement between public entity and private entity. ठीक है, ये थोड़ा आपका core economics का question हो जाता है. Okay, moderately difficult question, I would say, coming from the topic of investment models. पहले तो ये it talks about that you have to explain the meaning of investment in economy in terms of capital formation. ठीक है, तो आपका capital कैसे form हो रहा है economy में? Capital formation either comes from domestic investment or from foreign investment. ठीक है, ये दो heads हैं आपके capital formation के. Okay, right. So पहले तो आप इसको explain कर दोगे, the meaning, you will explain the meaning of the investment and how investment is either done on a small scale or on a large scale, or you can also talk about the partnerships and all. लेकिन उतना डिटेल में जाने की I don't think ज़रूरत है. You can simply talk about the meaning of investment, which is very basic. Okay. In terms of capital formation, फिर second part कह रहा है discuss the factors to be considered while designing a concession agreement between public entity and private entity. Okay, so this is basically talking about जब आपका PPP agreement sign होता है. Okay, so public private partnership sign होती है. So what are the factors that should be taken in mind, or what are the models that should be kept in mind, right? Those. Okay, for example, it says the second part of question is relatively easy, could be answered if PPP investment has been studied and Kelkar committee on PPT has been covered. ठीक है, so if you have learnt about the Kelkar committee recommendations, कुछ brief idea अगर है आपको PPP का, और आपको मॉडल्स पता होना चाहिए, बेसिकली इन्वेस्टमेंट मॉडल्स पता होना चाहिए कि किस इन्वेस्टमेंट मॉडल में how much share is given by government, how much share is given by the private sector. Then there are, for example, highways का अगर हम example लेते हैं, for highway construction if it is done on PPP basis, ठीक है. So in that case, government also gives the private player the right to collect the toll, ठीक है, जिससे the private player can get their profit for whatever investment they have done into the highways. ठीक है, तो ऐसी वाली चीज़ें you could have discussed in this article, but before that you should have a good understanding about different investment models. Okay, right, different types of PPP आपको पता होने चाहिए. Okay, so again core economics का question है. If you know about investment models, you could have attempted it well. Otherwise, you might have written a more generic answer. Then second 12th question talks about explain the rationale behind GST Compensation to States Act of 2017 and how has COVID impacted the GST Compensation Fund and created new federal tensions. Highly in news, बहुत ही बार न्यूज़ में ये डिस्कस हुआ है, बहुत ज़्यादा क्रिटिसिज्म भी हुआ है गवर्नमेंट का in this regard. Okay. So GST compensation to states, when in July 2017 GST came up, so government had promised the states that for all the revenue shortfalls, government will be compensating the states for 5 years for all the revenue shortfalls. Okay, but now COVID happened and government is not giving that compensation to the states. That is why there is a conflict between the states and the center. ठीक है, तो इसी के roundabout this question had to revolve. First you had to talk about the rationale, what is the rationale behind GST Compensation Act, because when GST was to be brought, so many states were not in favor of bringing GST का question 2019 में भी आया मेंस में, ठीक है, there was first question on GST. Okay, so it was asking that what taxes have subsumed in GST. तो देखो अब फिर से there's a repetition of GST question. अच्छा, तो states were not very much in favor of GST. Why? Because states were saying that there will be a revenue shortfall, and in India there is a division. Some of the states are manufacturing states where the labor migrates to such states, like labor migrates to Maharashtra, labor migrates to Gujarat, or labor migrates to let's say Karnataka or Delhi, to such places. So these are manufacturing centers. ठीक है, तो it was being said that the states which are involved in manufacturing will be at loss, ठीक है, due to GST, right? So there were so many questions raised by the states. So you can talk about the rationale on these grounds. Ki what was the rationale to bring the compensation, because states were not so much in favor of for these points. Okay, so you can talk about this. Then how has COVID impacted GST compensation? So you can talk about the revenue shortfall and how the closed systems, जो economy में बहुत सारी sectors have closed down, especially the service sector, right, or the restaurants or ये वाली चीज़ें around you which have closed down. It has impacted the GST compensation, how the industries or some of the factories were shut for some period of time, and how it has impacted on the revenue collection of government, and thus the consequent impact on the compensation, right? That is why the center was not able to give the compensation, and this led to federal tensions. Okay, so it was again very straightforward question, nothing to be read between the lines in the question, है ना? बहुत ही सीधा साधा क्वेश्चन आपसे पूछा है, कुछ आपको इन्फर नहीं करना है कि क्वेश्चन क्या कह रहा है ना? सभी क्वेश्चंस रादर मुझे ऐसे लगे GS3 में जो आपको सीधा सीधा पूछ रहा है कि ये बता दो एंड यू आर डन. ओके, तो आपको बस फैक्ट्स पता होना चाहिए, उसकी डेफिनेशन पता होना चाहिए और आप अच्छा सा आंसर लिख सकते थे, राइट? Then question 13 is, what are the major factors responsible for making rice wheat system a success? Okay, guys, I hope you are understanding what I am saying. सब कुछ ऊपर से तो नहीं जा रहा है ना? Okay, right, it talks about rice wheat system. What are the major factors responsible for making rice feed system a success? In spite of this success, how has this system become bane in India? ठीक है, so first of all you will talk about what is rice feed system, how major part of agriculture period revolves around rice feed system in India, है ना? Especially the northern belt की अगर हम बात करें तो, so we'll be talking about that and how it has been successful, how it has contributed to making India food grain sufficient, and then you will talk about, in spite of this success, how has this system become bane in India. Okay, you will talk about green revolution, yes, you will talk about the aid from USA, you will talk about the food aid program of USA. Okay, तो ये सारी चीज़ें आप डिस्कस करोगे एंड हाउ इट इज़ बिकम बेन इन इंडिया. तो बेन के रिगार्ड में यू विल टॉक अबाउट सो मेनी थिंग्स, लाइक व्हाट, ठीक है? जैसे कि यू कैन टॉक अबाउट हाउ इट हैज़ इम्पैक्टेड द लैंड, हाउ इट हैज़ इम्पैक्टेड द वाटर अवेलेबिलिटी इन इरीगेशन प्रैक्टिसेस, कैसे इम्पैक्ट हुई हैं by this rice wheat system, because you know that even the dry areas, after they have the irrigation facilities available, these dry areas have also started growing rice, but it is very very detrimental for the soil, है ना? जो जैसे पंजाब हरियाणा के एरियाज हैं, इन्होंने राइस उगाना शुरू कर दिया, लेकिन उनकी लैंड इज़ नॉट आइडियल फॉर राइस, राइट? तो इसमें आप इस बारे में बात कर सकते थे दैट दिस हैज़ बिकम अ बेन बिकॉज इट इज़ इंक्रीजिंग द सैलिनिटी, it is increasing the salinity of the right, increasing the salinity of the soil, कैसे वो soil को impact कर रहा है. Okay, then you can talk about what more bane you can talk about. Focus on protein based crops कम हो गया है ना? प्रोटीन बेस्ड क्रॉप्स, पल्सेस पे फोकस कम हो गया है. देन यू कैन टॉक अबाउट द फैक्टर ऑफ MSP, देन यू कैन टॉक अबाउट लेसर फोकस ऑन अदर क्रॉप्स ऑफ हॉर्टिकल्चर, ऑयल सीड्स एंड अदर सच क्रॉप्स पे फोकस हैज रादर रिड्यूस्ड. ठीक है, वाटर गजलिंग है राइस, ओके, इट इज़ अ वाटर इंटेंसिव क्रॉप, तो इट हैज़ ऑल्सो इम्पैक्टेड द वाटर लेवल्स ऑफ इकोलॉजी को कैसे इम्पैक्ट किया है. ये सारी चीज़ें यू कुड हैव डिस्कस्ड अबाउट हाउ इट हैज़ बिकम अ बेन. ठीक है, सो दैट यस, कॉन्सिक्वेंसेज ऑफ सक्सेस वाले पार्ट में, फर्स्ट पार्ट में यू विल टॉक अबाउट हाउ इट इज अ सक्सेस, बट हाउ इट हैज़ बिकम अ बेन ओवर द पीरियड ऑफ टाइम. ऑल्दो एट दैट टाइम इन 60s इट वॉज पोर्ट्रेड एज द अल्टीमेट सोल्यूशन of agricultural problems, but now how it has gradually become the bane. ठीक है, तो आप इकोलॉजिकल फैक्टर्स या फिर न्यूट्रिशन फैक्टर्स, सारे फैक्टर्स को इसमें मेंशन कर सकते थे. ओके, देन 14th क्वेश्चन टॉक्स अबाउट सजेस्ट मेजर्स टू इम्प्रूव वाटर स्टोरेज इन एंड इरीगेशन सिस्टम. ठीक है, क्या आपने मेजर्स सजेस्ट करने हैं टू इम्प्रूव वाटर स्टोरेज एंड इरीगेशन सिस्टम टू मेक इट जुडिशियस यूज अंडर डिप्लीटिंग सिनेरियोज. बहुत ही स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड क्वेश्चन, डिफरेंट टाइप्स ऑफ इरीगेशन सिस्टम से उसने पूछ लिया है क्वेश्चन. ओके, रादर 19 में ऐसे क्वेश्चंस नहीं आए थे. इट इज़ मोर ईजियर दैन प्रीवियस ईयर्स पेपर. ओके, इट सेज आपको सिंपली वाटर स्टोरेज सिस्टम्स को कैसे इम्प्रूव करना है. तो यू कैन ऑलवेज टॉक अबाउट कि जो हमारी ट्रेडिशनल प्रैक्टिसेस रही हैं, आर ट्रेडिशनल प्रैक्टिसेस ऑफ वाटर स्टोरेज, यू कैन रादर टॉक अबाउट दी times when the princes, the kings, dynasties के time पे there were so many practices of water storage. जैसे कि you can talk about the Baulis or Johars, or you can talk about the step wells and these kind of traditional water storage practices which can be revived, right? And you can always use a case study in such a answer. आप case study use कर सकते हो. You can use the case study of तमिलनाडु. ठीक है, तो तमिलनाडु रीजन में it has always been a traditional practice to have a underground well, to have a underground tank rather is the appropriate word. To have a underground tank is a traditional practice in तमिलनाडु. तो उसकी आप केस स्टडी यूज कर सकते हो, एंड हाउ विद द इंक्रीजिंग अर्बनाइजेशन ऑफ दैट एरिया दिस अंडरग्राउंड टैंक प्रैक्टिस हैज बीन फेस्ड आउट, है ना. तो आप ये चीज़ को डिस्कस कर सकते हो कि दिस कैन बी रिवाइव्ड टू इम्प्रूव वाटर स्टोरेज एंड इरिगेशन सिस्टम, बिकॉज इन गिवन द क्लाइमेट चेंज एंड गिवन द मानसून वेगरीज, जैसे मानसून फ्लक्चुएट करता है और जैसे क्लाइमेट चेंज हो रहा है, तो कभी यू हैव ड्रॉट्स, कभी यू हैव फ्लड्स, राइट. तो इन सब चीज़ों से डील करने के लिए इट इज़ वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट दैट यू हैव प्रॉपर इरिगेशन सिस्टम्स इन प्लेस. ओके, so then you can also talk about the modern irrigation practices, that along with reviving the ancient practices of irrigation, you also take note of modern irrigation practices which can ensure judicious use of water, जैसे कि आपके sprinklers हो गए, और you have drip irrigation system. Okay, so or you can always talk about rainwater harvesting, all the rooftop rainwater harvesting, है ना. तो so many scenarios, and always use numerous examples. जब आप ड्रिप इरिगेशन की बात करो तो आप मेघालय की बात करो, राजस्थान की बात करो, टॉकिंग अबाउट ड्रिप इरिगेशन. रूफ टॉप रेन वाटर हार्वेस्टिंग की बात करो तो टॉक अबाउट पेनिनसुलर इंडिया वेयर इट हैज़ बीन अ प्रैक्टिस, राइट. so many things full of examples you could have talked in this answer. Okay, yes, right. So talking about question number 15, it talks about COVID-19 pandemic has caused unprecedented devastation worldwide. ठीक है, अगेन बेसिक सा क्वेश्चन है, बहुत ज़्यादा ओवरली हमने कोविड पैंडमिक की बात कर ली है. वी हैव रेड इन न्यूज़ पेपर्स हाउ टेक्नोलॉजिकल एडवांसमेंट आर बीइंग अवेल्ड readily to win over the crisis, given account of how technology was sought to aid the management of pandemics. इसमें from PPE kits to masks to sanitizers to sanitization drives से लेके to the vaccination, सब कुछ आप बात कर सकते थे in this question. Okay, and पहले in first part you could have talked about how the world has devastated, how the economies have been affected, how the societies have been affected. ठीक है, फिर how our technological advancements have been availed to readily win over the crisis, how technology has sought to aid management. इसमें आप टेक्नोलॉजी के तो बहुत सारी चीज़ें जैसे मैंने आपको बताया, you could have discussed about that. Okay, then talking about 16th question, describe the benefits of deriving electric energy from sunlight in contrast to conventional energy generation. Okay, what are the initiatives offered by a government for this purpose? Again, ठीक है, ज़्यादा मतलब easy to medium है ये. अगर आपको कुछ initiatives गवर्नमेंट के पता थे, so it would have been a easy question for you. ज़्यादा demanding question है नहीं. Simply बोल रहा है benefits of deriving, talking about benefits of deriving electric energy from sunlight in contrast to conventional energy. Conventional energy generation we know mainly based on thermal power generation or maybe hydroelectricity, but when we talk about electrical energy from sunlight, we talk about more of solar power. How India being a sunshine country, right, how it can reap the benefits of solar energy, right. So benefits of deriving, इसमें आप बात कर सकते हो कि कैसे आपका coal usage will reduce, how the pollution from the thermal power plants will reduce. So these are among the benefits. Okay, how if you will reduce your reliance on hydroelectric power, so you will not have to construct such dams which over the period of time tend to be risky in nature. ठीक है, तो इन सब चीज़ों की आप बात कर सकते थे. Then you could have talked about, है ना, Then you could have talked about what are the initiatives offered by government for this purpose, यानी कि इलेक्ट्रिक एनर्जी फ्रॉम सनलाइट, इसके लिए क्या पर्पसेस हैं. यू कुड हैव सिंपली टॉक्ड अबाउट ISA, यू कुड हैव टॉक्ड अबाउट गवर्नमेंट्स इनिशिएटिव. गवर्नमेंट ने ऑलरेडी डिक्लेयर कर दिया दैट 40% ऑफ इट्स एनर्जी प्रोडक्शन विल कम फ्रॉम नॉन रिन्यूएबल सोर्सेज, है ना, रिन्यूएबल सोर्सेज से आएगा. ठीक है, तो ये सब चीज़ आप इसमें डिस्कस कर सकते थे. फिर उसके बाद 17 क्वेश्चन में क्या है, व्हाट आर द फीचर्स ऑफ नेशनल क्लीन एयर प्रोग्राम. अगेन बहुत ही स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड क्वेश्चन है, सीधा सीधा पूछ रहा है कि क्या आपके फीचर्स हैं नेशनल क्लीन एयर प्रोग्राम के इनिशिएटेड बाय गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया, है ना. तो जैसे आपका जल शक्ति अभियान वाला क्वेश्चन आया, सीधा पूछ लिया कि फीचर्स क्या है. फिर इसमें फीचर्स पूछ लिया नेशनल क्लीन एयर प्रोग्राम के, तो सिंपली इसमें लिस्ट करने थे. इफ़ यू हैव रेड, अगर आपने गो थ्रू किया होता नेशनल क्लीन एयर प्रोग्राम क्या है, ओके, तो आप ये आंसर कर पाते. बहुत स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड है. आई डोंट थिंक आई नीड टू कवर दिस. सिंपली करंट अफेयर्स की किसी भी आपको कंपाइलेशन में ये मिल सकता है. टॉकिंग अबाउट 18th क्वेश्चन, डिस्कस द रीसेंट मेजर्स इनिशिएटेड इन डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट बाय गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया डिपार्टिंग फ्रॉम अर्लियर रिएक्टिव अप्रोच. देखो, अब इस केस में ना, इस केस में आपको थोड़ा सा फॉर द गवर्नमेंट भी आप बात कर सकते हो और कुछ क्रिटिसाइजिंग मेजर्स भी आप डिस्कस कर सकते हो. ओके, तो रीसेंट मेजर्स अगेन करंट अफेयर्स बेस्ड टॉपिक है. कंपैरेटिव स्टडी कर सकते हो कि पहले गवर्नमेंट कैसे रिएक्टिव अप्रोच अपनाती थी. राइट, पहले गवर्नमेंट का फोकस वॉर ऑन कि एक बार डिजास्टर आपका हो जाए तो कैसे रिलीफ मेजर्स देने हैं, है ना, कैसे रिलीफ मेजर्स देने हैं, कैसे उस पर रिहेबिलिटेशन करना है. बट नाउ government's focus is more on disaster mitigation and disaster preparedness, right. तो इसमें जो मैंने I have talked about the disaster management cycle बहुत बार, right, कि प्री डिजास्टर क्या करना है, पोस्ट डिजास्टर क्या करना है. I have discussed about this cycle, तो ये आप बात कर सकते थे इस आंसर में, right. एंड जो गवर्नमेंट ने स्टेप्स लिए हैं, जैसे अर्ली वार्निंग सिस्टम फॉर साइक्लोन्स हो गया, है ना, अर्ली वार्निंग सिस्टम फॉर फ्लड्स, या फिर ड्रॉट सिनेरियो अगर बन रहा है, ठीक है, तो उससे काउंटर करने के लिए व्हाट आर द स्टेप्स दैट कैन बी टेकन, या फिर देयर आर इंक्रीजिंग लेवल्स ऑफ वाटर लेवल्स इन योर डैम्स, तो उससे काउंटर करने के लिए व्हाट स्टेप्स कैन बी टेकन, राइट. तो दीज आर सो मेनी थिंग्स दैट गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया हैज टेकन फॉर मिटिगेशन एंड प्रिपेयर्डनेस ऑफ डिजास्टर दैट यू कुड हैव डिस्कस्ड इन दिस आंसर. नाउ कमिंग ऑन टू क्वेश्चन नंबर 19. What are the determinants of left-wing extremism? Talking about determinants of left-wing extremism in eastern part of India, आपका जो parts of Odisha, झारखंड, छत्तीसगढ़ वाला जो region है, right. So what strategy should government of India, civil administration and security forces adopt to counter the threats in affected areas? ठीक है, this I would say is a bit moderate to difficult क्वेश्चन, क्योंकि अगर आपने नहीं किया है ये प्रॉपरली कवर अबाउट द डिटर्मिनेंट्स और गवर्नमेंट ने ऑलरेडी क्या स्टेप्स लिए हैं, सो यू कुड नॉट हैव सजेस्टेड इट प्रॉपरली, है ना. सो येस, दिस रिक्वायर्स मोर ऑफ कंपैरिजन कि क्या क्या चीज़ें करनी है. तो अगर आपको पहले का नहीं पता है गवर्नमेंट ने क्या किया, तो आपके लिए क्वेश्चन को आंसर करना थोड़ा सा डिफिकल्ट हो सकता था, राइट. देन फर्स्ट पार्ट वॉज मोर ऑफ फैक्चुअल, लाइक आई हैव सेड, एंड देन योर स्ट्रैटेजी, अगर आप अपने ओपिनियन से बता पाओ कि गवर्नमेंट कैसे, अब इसको ना आप उस आंसर से रिलेट कर सकते हो जो हमने बात की, दैट हाउ यू कैन टेक लोकल्स इन कॉन्फिडेंस टू रिड्यूस द मिलिटेंट एक्टिविटीज़, ठीक है. तो इसको आप कहीं ना कहीं उस आंसर से रिलेट करके उसके पॉइंट्स भी आप इसमें डाल सकते थे, ठीक है. सो दिस इज अबाउट 19th क्वेश्चन. रीड मोर ऑन लेफ्ट विंग एक्सट्रीमिज्म, read more on what are the issues of Naxalites और क्या problem होती है Naxalism और Naxalite affected areas, right. Then probably you would be able to answer this question. Talking about last question, analyze internal security threats and trans-border crime along Myanmar, Bangladesh and Pakistan borders including LOC. Again बहुत बार न्यूज़ में रहा है कि क्रॉस बॉर्डर इशूज़ क्या क्या चल रहे हैं विद ऑल दीज 3 कंट्रीज़, स्पेशली म्यांमार, बांग्लादेश. स्पेशली बांग्लादेश की अगर सबसे पहले बात करें, टॉकिंग अबाउट बांग्लादेश, लेट्स से, सो यू हैव माइग्रेंट इशूज़ विद बांग्लादेश, राइट. माइग्रेंट इशूज़ हैं, इन्फिल्ट्रेशन के इशूज़ हैं विद बांग्लादेश, एंड देर आर ऑलवेज apprehensions कि जो migrants आते हैं बांग्लादेश से, right, they can also be a security threat to our country, okay. और नॉर्थ ईस्ट इंसर्जेंट ग्रुप्स हो गए जैसे, या फिर आपकी नागा फैक्शंस हो गई, उल्फा इफ यू हैव हर्ड अबाउट, राइट, यस, असम का उल्फा, ओके. तो इनकी इंसर्जेंसी, इनके जो इंसर्जेंट ग्रुप्स हैं, दे कैन बी सपोर्टेड बाय सम ऑफ द लोकल्स ऑफ बांग्लादेश और सम ऑफ द ग्रुप्स, मिलिटेंट ग्रुप्स ऑफ बांग्लादेश. देन म्यांमार में तो ये चीज़ें बहुत ही क्लियरली ये दिखता है कि म्यांमार में रादर इंडियन आर्मी हैज़ ऑल्सो डन सम ऑफ द ड्रिल्स. इंडियन आर्मी ने कुछ ड्रिल्स भी की हैं विच वर कोवेटेडली डन बाय इंडियन आर्मी टू रिजॉल्व द प्रॉब्लम ऑफ NSCN इशूज ऑफ म्यांमार, है ना. क्योंकि आपको ये भी पता होगा, अगर आपने इस बारे में पढ़ा है थोड़ा सा, तो देन यू मस्ट हैव हर्ड that some of the insurgent groups like National Socialist Council of Nagaland, NSCN, NSCN IM या फिर NSCN K, इनके बारे में आपको पता होगा, right. So these have been operating from Myanmar and these have been infiltrating into India from Myanmar, right. So many security threats on Myanmar-India border are there, और उसका benefit has always been taken by China also. तो इसके भी कुछ news आती रहती है कि some security threats and some, इन चीज़ों में कुछ बेनिफिट चाइना ले जाता है, बिकॉज चाइना ऑलवेज वांट्स इट्स इंक्रीज कंट्रोल ऑन अरुणाचल प्रदेश रीजन, ओके. देन इफ वी टॉक अबाउट पाकिस्तान का तो आपको पता ही है कि पाकिस्तान से लॉट ऑफ इन्फिल्ट्रेशन इज देयर इन जम्मू एंड कश्मीर, एंड अगेन द लोकल्स आर इन्फ्लुएंस्ड बाय पाकिस्तानी टेररिस्ट और यू नो द पाकिस्तानी इन्फिल्ट्रेंट्स. तो ये सारी चीज़ों को आप एनालाइज कर सकते थे on Myanmar, Bangladesh and Pakistan border. Also it says discuss the role played by various security forces in this regard. अब इस चीज़ के लिए what you require is what you need to know then on which border which of the security forces are deployed. ठीक है, जैसे अगर हम BSF कहाँ पे है ना, या फिर ITBP जैसे तिब्बतन बॉर्डर पे है, राइट. सो यू शुड बी नोइंग दैट विच ऑफ द फोर्सेज आर डिप्लॉयड एंड हाउ दे डील विद. इसका कुछ रफ आइडिया होना ज़रूरी है टू talk about the second part or discuss the second part of this question, okay. ठीक है, so this is something you could have discussed in this answer. थोड़ा core of security issues हैं, तो थोड़ा सा difficult भी रहा होगा कुछ लोगों को आंसर करना, but again the more you read, the more you practice, more you get better at it. Use of AI, cooperation from locals, yes, youth role, all these things you could have discussed in this question, absolutely. ठीक है, डॉक्टर शिखा यादव, राइट. गाइज, दिस इज वेयर वी कंप्लीट टुडेज सेशन. ऑफकोर्स ये ओवरव्यू था, प्रॉपर एक्सपैंडेड एनालिसिस आपको मिल जाएगा, बट दिस गिव्स यू अ फेयर आइडिया कि कैसा पेपर रहा और व्हाट यू शुड बी एक्सपेक्टिंग फ्रॉम UPSC इफ यू राइटिंग 2021 का मेंस, ओके. या so this is about it in today's session. Do share and like this session, guys, and I hope you found it useful. Thank you so very much for joining in. Those who are attending, or those who usually attend my editorial sessions, I'll be meeting you guys at 12 PM on Monday. Okay, till then, have a great day. Bye bye.